officially to start our meeting for today, and because I'm really, first of all, I'm to express our appreciation, a deep appreciation for being with us today, being together in Vienna, and because this city already that we have a terrific success within the global alliance, on the leaders alliance, we established strategic planning group. It is my understanding. With your participation and Mr. El Baradei, I would like to, he invited me to meet tomorrow at his home, and he will be part of us. So we will provide some, because of the health also, he is, I'll try to be, to discuss him and to just, to explain him what we've done today. And today is accession day, and I'm really sorry that we work during the whole day, but unfortunately maybe God with us. Maybe it's symbolic that we launch this strategic planning group. For me, this is extremely important. Just maybe it will be a good opportunity to us just to discuss what has happened in direction of the nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and nuclear security since our last meeting in November. It's something like half year, but happened a lot, practically in all dimensions of international security, if we may, economic and military, political, and the human. And that's why it will be a very good opportunity just to share viewpoint between us. And maybe we are looking to provide some document, because we need, after that we prepare some minutes and report to our meeting, and to send it to all members of the alliance leaders. For today, I would like just to, for today we have 80, Zida?
It's up to 87.
87%, because last meeting it was 82, 5 new members coming to join with us, and that's why and after that it means that the main task of us for this time being just to institutionalize the process and strategic planning group, and now we are looking to finalize the establishing the secretariat of the Global Alliance Leader in Kazakhstan, maybe to register Global Alliance Leader in Vienna and in Astana, in 2 cities, for example. The next step, what we are looking to do, and what we are looking to propose to discuss, because we, as a homework exercises, we did a lot, and for this time being, we have NGOs, 29 organizations on this particular direction. We're trying to look through, to analyze the whole activity of these organizations, starting from Pagosh Committee and until the last. And my understanding that it was really unique, our gathering is unique because we have in one basket non-proliferation, disarmament, and nuclear security. No one such kind of NGO organization, they have no such kind of direction of activity. For us especially, maybe it will be a good chance to discuss and to think about our creation within the framework of the Global Alliance of Leaders to special working group, maybe, for example, in the direction of non-proliferation and disarmament, the second one of the nuclear security. Maybe it will be better. The main idea of what we have to do, maybe the main, or maybe the main direction of our activity is, first of all, to work very hardly in order to restore not only maybe not now negotiations, but discussions of the disarmament and nuclear on disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation, for example, between 2 major countries, for example, or on bilateral and multilateral basis. For us, maybe it is just my proposal for your consideration, for thinking, exchanging viewpoint about what we have to do in the future. Instrumentally, for me, it's absolutely very important direction. The next one, maybe it will be extremely important, maybe maybe to present the Global Alliance of Leaders as very important NGO, and maybe in this direction it will be absolutely very important to establish the publishing magazine of the global alliance of leaders. For example, it will be something, part of them, it will be the information on what we are doing now, what we are looking to do in future, and what will be our main goals, and etc. So the next one, it will be the articles, analytical articles, scientific articles, on many directions, because, as you know, yesterday I met our ambassador here in Vienna, and because maybe 2 weeks ago he had a meeting with the General Secretary, Mr. Grossi. And you know his activity, his direction, very important direction, medicine. Why not? Because practically all dimensions of nuclear, not only us, but nuclear and the peaceful use of nuclear, it will be one of the main directions of us. It's just not only that my country now controls 41% of the nuclear fuel, but anyhow, we have many directions on this. And maybe it will be a good opportunity for this magazine to address the world community in new elements of all directions of the development of nuclear. This is this is my idea of what we are looking to do. Maybe I will be very happy if your ideas come to us, and after that we are preparing the minutes, and first of all to send to you in order to finalize it as a document, and to send it to members of the Global Alliance of Leaders, and then we are looking to send it to the United Nations, to New York, where they registered already, and to International Atomic Energy Agency, where our Global Alliance of Leaders already registered. And after that, step by step, go further. Because in my understanding, that now so extremely important, this is a fierce urgency of the moment, nuclear weapons. Many in the concept of this changed drastically, unfortunately. And what now is happening now in Ukraine, and etc. And if I'm not mistaken, that first use concept now just only preserved by 2 countries, India and China, just only 2. The rest finished. What does it mean? And all this, we need to proceed from the understanding that this planet is not only planet of the P5, is not only planet of the other nuclear weapons country. This is a planet of all. And that's why, so all activity, what we are doing now, what we are looking to do now, just to raise this understanding of the world development, of the planet development. This is what I would like to say in my introduction, and because we are not preparing the list of speakers on the centers, and floor is open, and I would like just maybe to present the floor first of all to Angela King, the prominent expert in this particular direction. And for me, as always, it is a great pleasure to hear from you, and maybe so it will be the direction. It will be you point out a very good direction of our discussion further. Thank you. Floor is yours.
And thank you very much to you, and also to your colleagues and to your country for organizing this meeting. Because I think there's one thing that you talked about, and that's right off the bat, is the issue of dialogue. And I feel that the dialogue has been very one-sided, particularly with the war in Ukraine. I think there's been a dialogue between a few member states, NATO, the West, quote unquote, but we haven't heard from countries like you as to how they feel about it. And I also welcome participants, from the Russian Federation, because I think it's really important that we continue the talk that goes past whatever is happening now on the ground. And I said that actually out in the coffee break to my good friend Vladimir here. And I said that, whatever happens, we need to basically stay in touch, and we need to be connected to the people, that are living in the Russian Federation, that we've known for years, that we appreciate their views, and there has to be more of a dialogue. And what is very difficult right now is to sort of see when is it all going to end, and where is it going to end up, and how has this talk that has now been elevated in terms of the nuclear saber rattling, as I would call it, where is that going to go? Because there's now a lot more talk. We have 2 important conferences coming up this year. One is the TPNW first meeting of states parties in June, and then we have the NPT review conference. And in the meantime, all of the...
Is it August?
It's August. It's 1 to 26 August, I think. And the difficulty is, of course, that whatever dialogue had been started last year between the US and the Russian Federation on the strategic dialogue, or strategic stability talks, sorry, have been put on ice. I mean, everything is on hold. And, what we have now is we have Russia being made a pariah state, I would call it, from the West. And the question is, how do we reestablish trust when all of this is over? How do we actually go forward? And this is not a dialogue that should be limited to basically quote, and I'm saying this very circumventionally, like the West and the Russian Federation and possibly also China thrown in. But on the other hand, this is something where we all need to make an input, and where I think particularly a country like yours is very important to be heard from as well. And no one of us who was at Nur-Sultan in November could have predicted that this was actually going to end up and just happen, 3 months later, basically, that's what it was, or even the events that took place in early January in Kazakhstan. So this is something that I find extremely important, and I must say that there have to be more voices that are speaking out, and not speaking out for one side, but speaking out for a meeting of minds in terms of, because we need to discuss also what comes afterwards, what happens at the NPT review conference. I cannot imagine but having a very, how should I say, confrontational meeting, because are the P5 going to come together with a statement? Is it going to be just a process? I think this is really, really very, very important to look at that. And I also worry about countries that are now thinking and saying, well, maybe if I had a nuclear weapon, I would not have been subject to such a treatment by one country who is a P5. So this is really, we need to think about this. We also need to think about how can we forestall that? How can we not have this? And I also worry about Sweden and Finland joining NATO. I don't think that is a very good development. I mean, it's my personal opinion, but on the other hand, it just sharpens the whole debate further and puts it, pits it against each other. So this is really something we need to think about. And I also wanted to mention that it's not only a matter of the nuclear issues, but it's also a matter, for example, there have been accusations about chemical and biological weapons possession in Ukraine, which I also worry about. So while I know that our focus is here on nuclear, that I just want to say that this is not all that we need to take into account. And I welcome your efforts to sort of suggest that we have like working groups, nuclear security, nuclear by the free world, but there are other issues that we can also focus on, like what you mentioned, medical nuclear security and issues like IEA is working on. So there are a number of focus areas that I think we could identify. Of course, everyone else needs to weigh in on this and to sort of see where do we go with this, what do we do with this. But I very much welcome your effort to call us here together, think about this, and have an open dialogue as to how we could possibly go forward.
Thank you, Angela. And I'm really sorry that I would like just to convey my appreciation for gentlemen who are joined with us offline. And this is Mr. Mark Finot and Mr. Batsanov.
Yeah, no, Mr. Ifliter.
Sorry? Yves, where is Mr. Batsanov? Okay. These two gentlemen, you are most welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. If you would like to take the floor, please just let us know, and we will be very happy to hear from you. Okay, and the next, who would like to take the floor next? Please, Mr. Love.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ambassador and our Kazakhstan friends and colleagues for convening this very important meeting in these challenging times, I think. This is a very important initiative, and this is very important what you have been doing. So you definitely have the support of my institute's peer center here. On the substantive things, we definitely are in extremely challenging times when the role of nuclear weapons is unfortunately increasing. This is not what we wanted to see, because I think we are all committed, and here our collective I hope makes sense, to the world free of nuclear weapons. Basically, this is a legal commitment of our nations within NPT, and this is the way we should continue going. But I have in mind now taking both the immediate threats and challenges that we have been getting, and more long-term related issues, what we as a group here can realistically address and achieve. First of all, I do very much agree with Angela, my very good friend for many years, that we have in mind those events which are in the calendar just very soon and unrelated of the increasing tensions in Europe and globally, which will take place. Now the question, how they will take place. And of course, this TPNW conference in June, but what I have in mind very much is NPT review conference in New York in August. So we had a failure with the previous NPT review conference. We very much hoped and worked very hard to avoid that failure for the forthcoming conference, and COVID actually even gave us some extra time to make homework on that. And some homework was done, and it was positive. Look at the P5 document on renouncing the nuclear war and actually endorsing the fact obvious for this group, but not necessarily that obvious for all P5, that nuclear war cannot be won and should not be fought. Now we have not only the two, not only the historic document, but we have, of course, the Geneva document by Presidents Putin and Biden, enforced and added by the all P5 this early January. So I think this is an extremely important thing we should build upon, even in these very challenging moments. The P5 role here, in my view, is extremely important. And Ambassador Busita was very helpful also in reminding us that we have at this group three pillars, all three pillars addressed. P5 normally also should address all these three pillars of issues, sometimes easier, sometimes not. And to the forthcoming NPT review conference, of course, these three pillars should be in the mind of P5, but I understand that even attempts to build some common language of the easiest thing, of peaceful uses of nuclear energy here in Vienna, so far are not met by all P5 members with positive attitude. So it will be difficult, and we should keep it on the radar screen. No less important, but maybe more important, particularly as our gathering today is not at P5 at all.
Inshallah.
I'm thinking of bridging, because what groups like ours can do is not destroying the bridges, but building the bridges, maintaining those which still remain, and hopefully building new ones. At least one more. And this is a bridge between nuclear weapon states, P5 I just mentioned, and non-nuclear weapon states, including many of those who joined and supported the TPNW. Because sometimes there is a perception of that there is actually two different universes. They're not, and they're clearly overlapping. How they should positively overlap, that we do not have a rivalry rhetoric here and there, that will really contribute to the world free of nuclear weapons together through different vehicles and different mechanisms, seeing them as not rivalry but complementary. It's a big question, We will not solve it right now because it was not resolved before, unfortunately, but trying to contribute to that bridging between the nuclear have-nots and nuclear haves in this moment, I think is important. And the final point is on the bilateral US-Russian dialogue on nuclear issues, on future of arms control, which Ambassador Ambusitov invited us to contribute on. With all the pains of what we see in Europe, we certainly all should realize that the hot phase of the conflicts, sometimes they are over. And we should be prepared for that, how to rebuild the European security architecture, but also the arms control architecture, which is clearly in ruins. We do not have, unfortunately, any progress on multilateral nuclear arms control where Russia and the United States could be obvious leaders. I mean, CTBT. In Vienna here, it's quite obvious. I just told my friend who deals with the parliamentarian-related issues how difficult it is sometimes in Moscow these days to explain to legislators and to some others that Russia should stay in the CTBT, because of course there are voices why Russia signed and ratified so many years ago. We do not test. How can we trust our nuclear weapons if we do not test? And when Americans do not join, why do they not join? We're suspicious to them. So all those kinds of things, mistrust to which Angela referred to, and practical security matters, they come together. And I'm not saying Russia is planning to withdraw, not at all, this is not the message. But the message is, if we help facilitate that effort for the CTBT to survive and hopefully one day realistically to come into force. And of course, for that we need US leadership in the process, joining fully ratifying, of course, the CTBT. This, I think, would be extremely, extremely important for all of us. And here, of course, Kazakhstan is extremely well positioned as an example for all of us. And of course, having in mind the test site in Semipalatinsk. And on the other elements of arms control, well, START still working. New START still working. We still continue doing it. It's very, very difficult. And whether we can think of something post-START, of course, not today. But as a group, we can think of that because, as I said, hot phases of conflicts one day will be replaced by a post-conflict situation. But what we can do here, and what we can what we can make also advise to colleagues in different capitals, including Washington and Moscow, but absolutely not limited to them, also to the European capitals here. Here's the example of nuclear weapon-free zones. Central Asian nuclear weapon-free zone is basically the only we have example in the Northern Hemisphere like that. And this, well, our Kazakhstani friends are better positioned to say, but I think this is a very important example.
But unfortunately, Central Asia is not the real nuclear weapons free zone. You know about this, yes. Because of that, we didn't receive negative, we received negative guarantees, but with reservations. It's not that Lautaloka, it's not the Mongolia, the case of Mongolia or stuff like this, because of many things which comes from trust, which comes from Tashkent agreements, which comes to the agreements which was already signed before. And that's why, so for this time being, yes, we did a lot on this in order to facilitate this process. I was involved personally in this in negotiations on this particular direction before my staying in Geneva. But my thinking is that in many cases, that nuclear weapons free zone is absolutely very important, and I totally agree that we need to follow this particular line of direction. I mean, nuclear weapons free zone, and as many as possible such kind of zone will be established on this planet. It means that for P5, it will be something like, I don't know, to narrow the intention of the nuclear weapons state to provide a political as a political instrument, for example, because it's extremely important, especially of what we were discussing during the last two review conference in New York, for example. This is a nuclear weapons free zone in the Middle East. This is extremely important.
But let's also think of this continent of Europe, and of course all the previous ideas have failed before, but thinking of those corridors or zones from the Baltic to the Black Sea or some others, I think it will be an important contribution to solving on the situation. And stopping here, I would like just to provide some book to our Kazakhstani friends and to Ambassador Busitov. Although the moment was not exactly just right to discuss Russia-US nuclear non-proliferation dialogue, I always refer to this book we published in Moscow and now publishing globally through Belgrade. That as good wine, you put it on a shelf or something, not for that long. Okay, and that it will be exactly right to use at some point.
Too fast.
Thank you.
Did you get the photo?
If you,
Oh, we were trying to take a photo.
You have it?
No. So fast. Wow, thank you.
no, there you go.
Off the screen, because it has.
No, move over. There you go, that's good.
And I would like just. You have the message from you the first who was awarded this medal. This is the 30 years of flawless intelligence nuclear testing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like the symbolism of the green leaf on the medal. That's beautiful. The symbolism is very powerful.
It's still a hope.
I know, it's very powerful. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you very much, and Mr. Orlov, and mistrust, yes, it's still a very important, if I may say so, elements in our discussions in the old world policy agenda. And but for me, last time I shared my viewpoint about that. This is one of the reasons why, for example, nuclear weapons dialogue, for example, yes, and non-proliferation and disarmament are not so successful, and it's coming step back and back and back, because it was artificially withdrawn from the whole agenda of the international security dialogue. It became something separate. For separate countries, for separate discussions, not for you, but for this portion of the countries. This is especially for him. But everybody's saying that we are proceeding from the indivisibility of security. We are proceeding from all elements needs to discuss to be on the balanced manner. But what has happened with this one, I don't know, because one of the reasons why we have so great problems, which is coming, becoming more and more big and bigger on this particular version, because of that, in my understanding. Because, for example, if we start negotiate these issues within the whole agenda of international security, we have a lot of loopholes. How to find a way and to, if I may say, something like, it will be something, new opportunities, new loopholes to start, or maybe to prolong, or maybe to have some step ahead in the negotiations on nuclear weapons. This is my understanding. Yes, my thinking is that Jonathan would like to take the floor.
Well, yeah, you've just opened up something I'm very passionate about.
Human security issues.
Exactly.
The biggest defender in the world of human security.
Well, I mean, you phrased it better than anyone ever has said it. You said this is a planet for all, a planet of all. And that's the reality that we live in as never before in human history. And the nuclear issue being treated as if it's somehow outside of the fabric of the modern dilemma, that we have the modern dilemma being we have a set of existential threats that we've created for ourselves. And we've created engines that benefit exacerbating those threats to ourselves, such as fossil fuel, such as burning down the rainforests, our lungs, such as having a vaccine apartheid world in which the economic system does not promote global public health, such as neglecting to protect the phytoplankton, which is 50% of our oxygen. The health of the oceans depends on it. These issues are existential to humanity. They're not going to be solved at a national level. They don't operate at a national level. They didn't arise at a national level. The national system that we live under was created in a horse and buggy era, 1648, right around this area, because people were killing each other as to whose definition of Jesus' love was preferred. Let's be very frank about it. And that system is the basis of multilateralism. I'm not at all suggesting that we should do away with the multilateral state-oriented system, but I am suggesting that the framework needs to come up to modernity. And nuclear weapons are specifically in that framework. To take them out of the framework of human security is illusory, and we don't have time for illusions right now. In 1640, there were people just like us, unknown to most of the world, sitting and thinking, how do we stop this downward spiral? Between 1640 and 1648, a lot changed in the world. Most people don't recognize that. I think we're at a similar, what I'll call an axial moment, in which ideas and framing of issues matters more than any other time. How we frame the nuclear issue determines largely the outcome. If we frame it essentially in terms of national security and national militarism as the way of pursuing security, I don't think we'll come up with the correct answer. I think we have to frame it in terms of what the UN has used the term human security. Governor Jerry Brown, a friend of mine, uses the term planetary realism. But the basis of it is that we are in a new era of the Anthropocene, as the UNDP calls it, in which we either have a planet for all or we don't have a planet. That's the reality. Now, when you look at nuclear weapons in that context, the whole frame of the debate changes. The frame of the debate leads toward not strategic stability, which reaffirms the Roman adage, prepare for war, receive peace, because that's what happens in the corridors of power. When you have when you have the military saying, well, the precondition for development is peace, and peace comes through military strength, you're going to have arms racing. That's wrong. It's simply not modernity. Peace amongst nations is achieved through common security. We're all familiar with that concept. But common security in the concept of military nationalism is unachievable. Common security is achievable in the realism of human security. So I believe strongly that the sort of North Star going forward for the world has to be grounded in realism. And I would say that's where human security comes in. Then I would suggest the more short-term issues that we might have progress on. In 1994, in order to gain the indefinite extension of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the P5, each one of them offered negative security assurances as part of the inducement for the indefinite extension. And it was referenced positively as a Security Council resolution, Resolution 984. And that was part of the inducement for the indefinite extension. They all, except for China, they had a qualification, which was, we won't threaten or use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear weapon state party to the NPT unless we are attacked by that party in conjunction with an alliance with a country with nuclear weapons. It seems to me that this would be a very good time for a General Assembly resolution extolling the virtues of these negative security assurances, talking about them being a step toward the fulfillment of a vision based on a nuclear war can never be won, must never be fought, which the P5 have just recently stated, and highlighting that these negative security assurances would preclude the use of nuclear weapons in the Ukraine. I think if we neglect to address the chaos of the moment, our relevance will be diminished. I think if we address it in a way that would have almost universal support very quickly, it would enhance the strength of the global alliance. So I'm suggesting that we have a serious discussion about advancing a General Assembly resolution extolling the virtues of these negative security assurances and highlighting their relevance to Ukraine. Even when Putin was brandishing the threat of nuclear weapons, within a few days, Lavrov and Medvedev backed it off and qualified it, because the world heard it as a threat. Lots of pundits in the United States said he's threatened to use tactical nukes and all sorts of things and speculations. But the official position of Russia was inconsistent with that. It said, we're only going to use them if the state of Russia is existentially threatened. They didn't say that the Ukraine was a place for it. So I think we should bring that out. It's not Russia's position that they want to use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine, and yet it's being mischaracterized as such. Now, if I'm wrong, and Russia is threatening to use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine, we should know that, because that's very serious. Because escalation, nothing could be worse for the world right now than an escalation into breaking the nuclear taboo in the Ukraine. That would be a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. And therefore, we should highlight these negative security assurances. And last but not least, I agree strongly with the value of nuclear weapons-free zones. There's 115 nations in them, but they don't coordinate. I think it would be a wonderful thing if there was some movement toward a secretariat of them. Now, I had a meeting with President Obrador of Mexico and began raising this issue. I was actually suggesting that Mexico have a day highlighting the triumphs diplomatically of Ambassador Robles, who won the Nobel Prize for Treaty of Tlatelolco, as well as being instrumental in the law of the sea, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, he's a towering figure in diplomacy, but it became very clear to me that the president of Mexico was not appreciative of this history, to say the least, nor particularly interested.
Small Costa Rica,
Not particularly, yeah, Costa Rica is very interested, but not Mexico. Even though, and where I was going with it was to suggest that Opinal be declared a secretariat for all of the nuclear weapons-free zones, but it was clearly apparent that that's not going to happen in this administration in Mexico. On the other hand, Kazakhstan has legitimacy to at least begin the process of discussing a secretariat for nuclear weapons-free zones. Because if they were coordinated in some way, the capacity to isolate the irrationality of the nine with them would be dramatically strengthened, the world would be strengthened, and I think this is a victory lap that the people of the world need to know about, and a secretariat would help do that.
It was already doing by our Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Yeah.
Especially in the working with all nuclear weapons-free zones. And one conference already provided in Astana, in Nur-Sultan, say 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I was invited to participate. I was really wondering that some online and offline, something like this, that the representative of practically of all nuclear weapons free zones, they participated in this. And it was a suggestion already of Kazakhstan to establish something like, to institutionalize this process, to establish some secretariat in New York or elsewhere, or in Vienna or in Geneva, something like that, to start to work.
Yes.
But for us, this is extremely important to do it from another side, through the expert groups, trying to find a way how to urge the person to do so, how to find a way to establish a good group of support, for example, or support group for establishing maybe, not for this time, maybe not a secretariat, but maybe some group of countries who would like to do so.
Yeah, yes, Ambassador Thomas Graham suggested that.
Because it is not the agenda of, I was really surprised that it was not the agenda of many countries.
I can assure you there are lots of allies for this process, but Kazakhstan has not continued to convene, at least in New York, amongst the missions to create a working group, and that a working group of a group of missions with civil society organizations could, I think, be helpful in advancing this idea. And obviously Kazakhstan has the credibility, and I'm very familiar with the process. And I'm saying that we could encourage that process, that this is something that would be, obviously, that creates dialogue amongst 115 countries implicitly. But the idea of the negative security assurances could be a framework for common dialogue immediately.
For example, such kind of scheme, for example, for P5. For example, just to propose to start negotiations between all P5, to start with this negative guarantees. For example, this just like a dream.
Yes.
To start this P5, practically, they clarified the portion of country to whom they now presented negative guarantees. Mm-hmm. It was a list of, I don't know, country 50 or 60. It means that we save something like the great portion of planet. The next one, this is a list of countries which are very close to this, but they need to do this 1, 2, 3, 4 in order to gain such kind of negative guarantees. And the third group, which they have no any possibility to do so, and to be presented by negative guarantees from P5 until they do and the back list of excuse me.
No, I just want to come in because I think this
it was a dream, and the engineer was something like when I served as ambassador. Yeah. I already to share your points within the CD conference on this. I was representing my country, but you know this forum. It's very difficult to wake up everybody to say, let us start to do something.
I just want to briefly come in, and I know others want to speak as well, but I just wanted to say that with regard to the nuclear security assurances, Germany was very interested in the topic. And there were a number of meetings that were held, and I participated in one of them in Geneva, in fact, where they were trying to push it. And I was wondering if Mark was in any way involved in that as well, because I think he was, and maybe he could have also a comment that he might come in on. So that's why I just want to mention. But Germany might be one of the countries which could also be a motor behind an initiative like this.
What about my dream? Is it realistic or not? Or still not?
One always has to pursue dreams. One always has to follow the dreams. Absolutely.
Yes. But the dreams, yes, is a reality.
That
will be a reality.
That would be the logical. That would be part of the logic of a process. Would have to lead to that, to say, well, who's in and who's out. But I think as the immediate, for our relevance, immediately addressing the Ukraine and not allowing that to be a place of escalation would be very relevant to the world. It would make our global alliance very relevant very quickly.
I'm out of our involvement in the situation of Ukraine, and that's why. So, just maybe. But what does mean existence?
It means that it's existential. It means that if you.
What does it mean? What's the definition of this?
It means.
Who knows?
I do. It means that if you.
In my understanding, nothing.
No.
Maybe
it's vital. What is the line between existence and non-existence?
No, it's vital. Existential is vital.
Vital, yes.
Existential interest is vital interest. It's your life.
But what is vital? For example, in Ukraine for Russia,
Nothing.
for example.
No. When I think actually Jonathan put it right, and Jonathan put it right in a sense that Russian military doctrine and its nuclear element speak clearly about existential threat to Russia or its allies. And with all of the drama of the current conflict, it's not related to any existential threat to my country unless there are, of course, clear presence of nuclear weapons from the other side. And
It's not the case.
NATO, and you can continue that, you understand, NATO and the United States start fighting with use of non-conventional weapons on the other side. Before that, we are talking about dramatic regional conflict, not involving nuclear weapons. I even would go further. I don't think we need to specifically refer to some specific regional situations. I think it's more important to look more broadly here. But of course, I think using of nuclear weapons, whatever kinds, unrelated, non-strategic, whatever, in a regional conflict would be very unwise, if not to say criminal. I don't think this is any plan of that. Thank you.
Yes, Mark, you would like to take the floor, or?
Okay.
Please.
I think you did,
Oh,
Please, Mr. Noel, the floor, and you will be the next. Maybe, yes.
Okay, it's good. Okay. First of all, I want to say that I am very agree with all the proposition of my colleagues, and particularly of my neighboring colleague.
Thank you.
But before, I should like to thank you very much to have organized this meeting, because
Thank you for joining us.
no, it's a pleasure. It's my pleasure. But we are living a very important moment because the nuclear issue is coming back. It's coming back, maybe because maybe in some European countries, for example, we have forgotten somewhere the danger of nuclear armament, weapons. But now we realize in Europe and everywhere in the world that nuclear issue, nuclear weapons, nuclear armaments are present. And first of all, that a nuclear war is possible. Because before, we believe, right or wrong, that a nuclear war was quite impossible, because every country was rational, was conscious of the danger of the nuclear escalation, but now we realize that the nuclear war is possible. Maybe it's the first time since the Cold War. And for that reason, I am very pessimistic, because the nuclear war is becoming possible more and more, because the NPT is quite dead, and the P5 disagree for everything between them, and because the race in nuclear armament is increasing, because of many and recently in my organization we have conducted a poll in France, and this poll said that 70% of the French people believed that nuclear weapons and nuclear armament increase the instability, strategic instability in Europe, in the world, not only in Europe, but in the world. It's a very crucial moment that we are living now, and it's a reason for what it's very important that your organization may show something to increase the stability, to say to the world that there are people. A lot of people in the world, they are for the non-proliferation, for the nuclear disarmament, and for the nuclear security. It's very important to have the capacity, the possibility, the will to say to the world that many people say that, because if we look at the world in the moment, all the nations all the state nations are willing to be under nuclear umbrella now. Everybody say, okay, fortunately, we may have, like the P5, our own nuclear weapons, or we can have a nuclear umbrella from the state for offshore, for everything from the P5. Okay, it's very important to say that it's not the solution. And I joined my colleague because we are living in a world in transition between the old war and the new world. The old war is, you know, the world of Hobbes, you know, the English philosopher, and the world of the Westphalia Treaty, which said that the world is made of state nations struggling each against the other. And okay, it's at the end, okay, it's a war between all the nations. It's a chaos. And we are living this world, still living in this world, and no, but in the same time we are living in a new world where the threats for the security of the world are global. The global, this climate, the pandemic, and many things like that. Okay, it's the reason for what your idea to somewhere enlarge a little or scope of discussion, of reflection, is okay to maybe to link the nuclear weapons and the global threat.
Yeah.
You know, because if you look at the climate, you can see that when you, first of all, when you launch a nuclear weapon, nuclear bomb, there are impacts of the climate and environment and something like that. But in the other side, on the other side, if we have a climate problem, we will have maybe possibility for conflicts and nuclear conflicts. You know, the interaction between climate and nuclear weapons, it's a double interaction. It's the same thing for many things. And I think it's very important to enlarge a little bit of this reflection and proposition. And okay, but the danger is to enlarge too much our reflection. And you know, we can have a scope too large for us. But you know, I think it's very important to get this one. And because I said, my colleagues, the aim is to obtain a human security. And the problem is the nuclear weapons are the ultimate moment of the race between the nations. Because, okay, with the total destruction of humanity, it's okay. It's a result of it's the ultimate reason for the fight between the nations, the state nation. Okay, but at the same time, the nuclear weapons are the first time where the humanity could destroy itself. It was the first. It was the first global threat, and now we are entering an era where the global threats are much more important as the real challenges of security for the humanity. It's important to have this link between the nuclear weapons. Okay.
Can I just make a quick, I know Mark is waiting, so if it's okay.
Mark is waiting?
Yeah,
Yes.
Mark, please, floor is yours. Is it okay?
yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the initiative and the kind invitation. I wish I could have been physically with you, enjoying the good atmosphere and food and wine in Vienna. But speaking from Geneva, I think that we also need to focus on perhaps three aspects, and I agree with many of the statements. The first is this question of dialogue or negotiations. We have two important review of the TPNW conference and then the review conference. So these are, of course, very important opportunities. At the same time, in the current situation, there is a feeling of, I would say, depression or resignation or low morale, especially in Geneva, with this ecosystem around peace and security and human rights. which really makes it very difficult to consider going back to business as usual. And that explains actually why now the prospects for any progress, any substantive advance in the nuclear field seems so remote. And at the same time, I mean, there is a sort of double track, if you wish. There is a sort of mainstream reaction to this situation, which considers that the militaristic approach, building increasing military budgets, developing nuclear weapons, is sort of the natural response. And it seems like a big wave, a big tsunami that a lot of civil society groups, NGOs feel desperate about. It's like stopping a tsunami with your bare hands. At the same time, there is this awareness raising and growing throughout the world. I would say that nuclear weapons, those countries that possess nuclear weapons, actually don't use them for their own security, but they endanger the world security, and this can serve as a shield to allow what we are witnessing today, invasion, destruction of another country without fear of serious response or exercise of self-defense. The second point, and I thank Angela for raising negative security assurances and mentioning Geneva in that respect. That actually makes me feel much younger, because when I was a junior diplomat, this was on the agenda like more than 30 years ago, and we don't seem to have changed very much or evolved. I was honored to be invited several times, in particular by Germany, but also other presidents of the Conference on Disarmament, as an expert to make proposals. With UNIDIR, we worked on the background paper mapping all the statements, declarations, which have changed, which are different depending on nuclear possessor states, and have changed over time. Some are legally binding, some are just declaratory, and that creates a feeling of confusion. We know, with all these caveats, these conditions, and that justifies the demand of the majority of states now for a very clear, legally binding, single assurance that would be particularly relevant in the case of Ukraine. And the third point is that this is another proposal that I have made when I addressed the Conference on Disarmament, was to frame this issue more into the question of nuclear risk reduction, because we have been discussing nuclear risk reduction, several techniques such as de-alerting, de-targeting, hotlines, but there is a key proposal, a key recommendation, which would be to make no first use of nuclear weapons universal, general among the nuclear armed countries. And if we succeeded this, and Aline Aware can of course talk a lot about the efforts of his organizations. In that respect, we will solve the issue of negative security assurances, because if the risk of any use of nuclear weapons is much reduced, then a fortiori it will be reduced against non-nuclear weapon states. So these are my suggestions. Perhaps we can have a sort of subgroup to summarize or to update these proposals. And by the way, you also mentioned nuclear weapon free zones, and there's been also a proposal for a long time, a long-standing proposal for a nuclear weapon free zone in Europe. And I think it's now that we have more and more states joining the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, that also makes it more relevant to readdress, revisit this question. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your very, very important suggestions, and that definitely will be incorporated to our list of what we have to do in the future. But I would like just, almost 30 years ago, I was personally involved in the negotiations on this Budapest Agreement. During this period of time, I was the director of the International Security and Control Department in MVA of Kazakhstan. Still, it is undersecret, as you know, so the essence and how these negotiations go on. But I would like just to explain the position of Kazakhstan. We fight very fiercely for negative guarantees. At the last moment, it was a document titled Guarantee Assurances. It was a guarantee, and it was legally binding. And in my understanding, so that it was at the later stage, as you know, as negotiations are going on, and to find a compromise, to find the loopholes, and etc., it was the full stop in Budapest on guarantee assurances. And that's why so many persons and I was really surprised, and analysts, they're saying that, especially in my country, that say that we already received guarantees. I'm asking when. They said they referring to the Budapest Agreement. The same story it was in Ukraine, but it's wrong. What about negative guarantees? It means negative guarantees. Guarantee assurances, it means guarantee assurances. Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, thank you.
Taking consideration that you are directly, yes, please go.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and yeah, it's a great
Thank you
pleasure
for
to be in the
joining
room
us.
with such esteemed colleagues, and looking forward to developing the ideas that we generate from this. I'd just like to, first of all, share directly with all the people that have gone before. We've got some great ideas that have come through from this, but I'd just like to share a few practical points that I've drawn from that. I just got back from Oslo yesterday, where they discussed the future of Europe vis-à-vis the Ukraine crisis, remilitarization of Europe, etc., etc. The one thing that's become apparent is that there is a global issue in the lack of trust, both of countries between countries and of institutions such as the UN. I still feel that some of the measures that we mentioned, such as the NPT, CTBT, and all the other instruments that people have worked on for years, are still a way of reinstating that trust. And I think some of the measures that we spoke about today would help that. And I would particularly support the negative security assurances and Mark's way of actually revitalizing that, if you like, in a new form and in a better context. Because I feel that at the moment, all of those, everything that's happening really needs to be relevant to the current situation, i.e. In the context of Ukraine and the impact, etc. We need a home for it as well, as in the nuclear weapons-free zones. I know all of us around the table, and I did some work with Mark in Jordan some years ago. And I've worked with all sorts of people on the Middle East weapons, mass destruction-free zone. But the problem is that there is no home for, as we discussed. So I think that's one practical area that we can look at. The other thing that we mentioned at the beginning was this, the fact that the nuclear issue has been parked in a very specialist field. What I've been working on for some years, I was in the military like yourself, so much at operational field level. But what I've found is not just within the civilian population, but the military population, some of the stuff that we learned in the 70s and 80s has just disappeared from the agenda. And what really concerned me yesterday at the conference was once again, the talk of a tactical nuke, which we removed from the battlefield some years ago, in the INF Treaty and things like that. The other aspect that I looked at is the younger generation has become very engaged in the climate issue, and they literally are very engaged in that. So what I did at COP26, and Alan attended, and a few people around the table attended, was that we phrased we did an event at COP26 in the context of nuclear and environmental change. So I think we need to look outside just the NPT and things like that and look at the COP conferences. And all of the work that I'm doing at the moment, whether it's based on Afghanistan or Ukraine, is within the context of the SDGs, because everyone has signed up to the SDGs. So there are frameworks outside of the specialist zone that I think we should target for some of those initiatives. And I know Alan and PNND actually, and Jonathan, everyone is doing a lot of work on that. So I think that's one area that would support all of those initiatives that we come across, and they're practical and they can be measured, and we can introduce the dialogue. The other thing, and this is, I'll finish on this point, it was a very simple thing. I'm not an academic, but one of the things that became obvious to me is that there's what I call, in my own way, a horizontal dialogue that goes on, whether it's a diplomatic dialogue, the specialist dialogue, academia, etc. And then what I think is missing is what I call the vertical, which is the intergenerational dialogue. And I know, once again, people are working a lot on that. And I think that's important. And I found that nexus of the nuclear and climate, we were able to engage across the generations. So the experience of, dare I say, the older generation and the younger generation have a continuation where we can actually have a negotiation and work together on that. So I would support all of the 4 initiatives as I see them that we've just come up with. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. So.
Well,
No, sorry.
unfortunately, we need to go to coffee break.
Yes, and we continue after the coffee break. So
Yeah, and we'll continue with
yeah.
your intervention, okay? 10 minutes, and after that, well, we begin, and we have a good opportunity to prolong our discussion within the lunch.
During the lunch.
And I would like to invite you for dinner.
Yeah.
This is this floor, second floor restaurant, and we may prolong. Please, coffee, please. Yes.